An estimated 50 million Americans suffer with some form of autoimmune disease, compared to 9 million with cancer and 22 million with heart disease. Autoimmune disease is the #1 cause of death in women under the age of 65, and medical research currently recognizes more than 100 forms of autoimmunity. Symptoms can affect all body organs, your joints and muscles, diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and psoriatic arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis, nerves like multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's has been recognized as autoimmune. Hormones, hypothyroidism, liver disease, autoimmune hepatitis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, all been recognized as autoimmune. The skin, eczema, psoriasis, vitiligo, dermatitis herpetiformis, and alopecia are all forms of autoimmune disease. Unfortunately, medical education provides minimal learning, and it can take decades to get a diagnosis. I believe that giving medications that suppress the immune system and contribute to cancer is not an answer. I believe that doctors should know more. I believe that they should step outside of the box of medical convention. I believe that doctors should be better trained in nutrition, in exercise, and the principles of functional medicine. I believe that autoimmune disease is a byproduct of our society's promoted imbalances. Imbalances in nutrition, in our perception of what is healthy. Imbalances in exercise, imbalances in sleep, in stress, in meaningful relationships, in our work. Imbalances in our immune system caused by decades of being told to take pills to suppress our body's warning systems. I believe that autoimmune disease can be put into remission. I believe that genes are not the problem. I believe that our genes are a gift from God, and that we are put here to be healthy and bring joy to those around us. I believe that the healthcare system is broken. I believe that drugs don't create health, but our choices and actions do. I believe that it is time for a change, and you are the only one with the power to make it. I believe in you. And if you believe as I do, if you believe in the power of your body to heal itself and need guidance on your journey, you're in the right place. Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We got a great live Q&A for you today. If you've got questions that you'd like me to answer, nutritional questions about health-related topics, the topic of the month is autoimmune disease. So if you've got autoimmune nutritional questions, now's the time to get those answered. And if you're new to the show, make sure you come visit us at glutenfreestudy.org and sign up there for our newsletter. We'll give you all kinds of free information on how to navigate the gluten-free diet properly and help you overcome your autoimmune problem. So let's dive into your questions. Oh, before I guess I should say this too. Make sure you hit that like button down below, and if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you hit that bell. Mary says, I've combined No Grain, No Pain with Dr. William Davis's Wheat Belly info to put both Hashimoto's and psoriasis into remission. Love that, Mary. Thanks for sharing your experience. Dr. William Davis, great man. He's actually on Gluten-Free Society's medical board of advisors. So, yeah, we love his work too. Let's see here. Another comment, the criteria for diagnosing celiac disease is absurd. More than likely, it's set by insurance companies at all. Yeah, the criteria for diagnosing celiac disease is absurd because it's inaccurate, it's outdated, and it's got a huge proclivity toward not finding the problem. Let's see. Is it true that vitamin C can create oxalate kidney stones? If so, does it matter if it's a pill or IV? So it is true, kind of. So the question is, and this is just my experience, Vio, that people that have a proclivity toward developing calcium oxalate kidney stones. Sometimes high doses of vitamin C for some people can exacerbate that. Not always. I haven't seen that be 100% true by any stretch. Now, there's a couple of really small scale studies that have shown an increased risk. So if you are someone who's had calcium oxalate stones and don't want to run the risk of another one, then high doses of vitamin C, you might just want to be cautious around that. And consider taking vitamin C, but just maybe at lower doses altogether. You can also take vitamin C with calcium. As a matter of fact, our Detox C has calcium is one of the main ingredients in it. And so, calcium binds oxalates, and that's one of the reasons why many people who are having to follow a low oxalate diet will take calcium, magnesium, calcium with their supplements, because that will help bind oxalates and prevent them from being being absorbed in the intestine. Let's see here. Can I eat wild rice on a regular basis? Yeah, I mean, wild rice, if you're trying to stay gluten-free, there's no gluten in wild rice, so you're perfectly fine there. Where people get in trouble with wild rice is the wild rice pilafs that have, they have other rices mixed in, but wild rice is not a grain, unlike the traditional white rice, polished white rice, and brown rice. Those all contain a type of gluten called orzonin, and so if you're trying to follow a grain-free, gluten-free, grain-free diet, those are not recommended. Okay. Please recommend bare minimum supplements for recovering people on a shoestring budget. Okay, bare bones, 2 things, very simple. Number 1, ultra nutrients. So we'll put a link up for that. It's a formula. I designed it. It's a very comprehensive multivitamin, multi-mineral formula. So it covers a lot of bases for those of you just trying to look for some solid nutritional supplementation beyond your food. But if you're trying to recover from years of gluten-induced damage, the likelihood that you have vitamin and mineral deficiencies is very high, at least based on my experience. When we test people, the average person has at least 4 deficiencies, and a lot of people have many, many more than that. I had just a couple of people in the clinic yesterday with 20 plus deficiencies. So it can get really, really bad. But my point is that Ultra Nutrients as a multivitamin will cover a lot of bases for you. It may not fully correct those deficiencies, but we're talking about bare bones recommendations. So that would be one thing I would recommend. The other would be Ultra Omega, which is an omega-3 fatty acid. Now, the reason why I have several blends, different types. If you go to Gluten Free Society and you're looking for supplements that are gluten-free, I have very different types of omega-3 supplement options. The reason why Ultra Omega, as opposed to the others, is because Ultra Omega contains lipase. Now, lipase is an enzyme that helps you digest fat, and that's what omega-3 is. It's a type of fat. Now, many of you with gluten sensitivity or a prolonged history of gluten issues have fat malabsorption problems because your GI tract has been damaged, your pancreas has been inflamed by the gluten, and so you're not producing adequate quantities of digestive enzyme, particularly lipase, to help you break fat down. And that's why Ultra Omega, because it contains lipase. So it's a very specialized omega-3 for people with a long-standing history of inflammation and an inability to properly produce their own digestive enzymes. So those 2 things is where I would start. If you're on a shoestring budget, hands down, those 2 things cover a lot of bases. Now, if you've got a little room to stretch in that budget, there are a couple of other things that I would suggest. One is Biotic Defense. Biotic Defense is a probiotic that contains the specific strains of bacteria that we know gluten can kind of lower, right? So research shows that there are certain strains that if you're gluten sensitive and you're eating gluten, that these strains are going to not colonize as well, and you're actually going to diminish them. So Biotic Defense contains those strains so that you can get them back into your GI tract. And then the next thing that I would recommend is vitamin D. As far as commonality, it's almost always deficient in people that I see for the first time that have, again, that years of gluten-induced damage. Vitamin D deficiency is very common. Vitamin D is also a trigger. A deficiency is a trigger for perpetuating autoimmune disease because vitamin D regulates immune function. So again, number 1 would be ultra nutrients, number 2 would be ultra omega, number 3 would be Biotic Defense, the probiotic, and number 4 would be vitamin D. And I've got several formulations of vitamin D, but probably the best one, again, for celiacs and for non-celiac gluten-sensitive individuals would be liquid D3. And the reason why it's emulsified, it's an emulsified version of vitamin D, so if your ability to digest and absorb that is compromised, it won't matter. You use this supplement and it'll still be absorbed. So those 4 things, hands down, would be where I would start. It's the cheapest place to start if you're looking for which supplements that you can add in to kind of begin your road to recovery. Good question, Mary. What supplement can one use to clear a lingering respiratory virus? You know, my favorite supplements to support immune system recovery, number 1, hands down, is NAC, N-acetylcysteine. We have a product called Ultra NAC that I would use in this case, and so you can go as high as 6 capsules a day on that to help expedite a recovery. It works very effectively. And we have an entire crash course on NAC if you want to learn more about it. It's in a specialized amino acid. Number 2, if your vitamin D levels are low, a lot of people struggle recovering because of low vitamin D. Remember, vitamin D regulates immune response. And so there's a high dose vitamin D therapy that you can do. We use a product, it's called Ultra D3. And each capsule is 50,000 units of vitamin D3. And so the way this is done is this is vitamin D therapy, right? So you just do this for a week. Actually, not even quite a week, it's about a half a week. So you take 3 capsules a day for 3 days in a row, and that will really drive up your vitamin D levels and support your immune system. So those 2 things would be at the top of the list. Now beyond that, you can add quercetin and zinc to that mix. We have a product called Ultra Q, which is high dose quercetin, along with Ultra Zinc. Those are both very, very helpful. Remember, zinc inhibits viral replication in 14 different ways. It's one of the most important nutrients that your body needs to regulate viral replication and viral spread. So very, very effective in doing that and supporting your body. So zinc, quercetin, vitamin D, and NAC would be my favorite top 4. Now I could go on and on about others that you could try, but that's where I would start first. Let's see here. Denny asks, is there a way to rid oneself of those antibodies quicker than 2 months? You talking about gluten antibodies, and I assume that you are. Not really. You know, one of the best things that you can do at post-gluten exposure, there's a handful of things you can do, but the best thing that you can do, at least in my experience, is to do a vitamin C flush. Flush your body with vitamin C, and that way that's done, you use vitamin C powder, so detox C. Be careful of different brands of vitamin C because most of them are corn derivative, which means that, you know, they've got corn in them, but they're also, when they're corn derivative, if they're not organic, then they're going to have glyphosate residue, and that's the worst thing you can do when you're trying to recover from being gluten. So a C flush is 6 grams of vitamin C mixed in about 3 ounces of water every 15 minutes until your bowels flush. And this is best done on an empty stomach, and it's best done on a day where you don't have any plans. In other words, if you're out and about, you don't want to try to do a vitamin C flush because you'll be running to every bathroom you can find because it takes about 4 hours to complete a flush for most people. That's the best thing you can do in a situation where you've been glutened. And in my experience, it's the best way to expedite recovery. The other thing is too fast. So once you do that vitamin C flush, try to get in a 24-hour fast. Remember, when your gut's been damaged by gluten, there's a lot of inflammation. And what that will translate into is that anything you eat when your gut is inflamed is going to have the potential to be a trigger. So just try to get a fast in, a water fast, 24 hours. And again, doing those 2 things can really help you recover. Help your body, support your body's ability to overcome. Niacin, not so much. It wouldn't be the top thing that I would recommend. Let's see, Mario says, hi doc, what can cause energy levels to drop abruptly only a few hours after waking up? Low cortisol. low cortisol. If you're waking up exhausted, or if you're waking up and you have a little energy, but then you just really struggle with getting in, starting and revving into your day, you probably have really low cortisol. A couple of supplements that you can take to support that. Number one would be vitamin C. Vitamin C is so amazing as a nutrient. It has so many functions, but one of its functions is really helping the adrenal glands and supporting their ability to function. Number two would be to take an adrenal gland organ meat supplement. So what some people call glandulars, and so a good glandular is going to have a lot of nutrients specific for your adrenal glands. So we have something called ultra adrenal support, which a lot of people you can go read the testimonials and the reviews. A lot of people find it very helpful in that regard. So those are things that you can use just to be helpful, but you also want to understand, why are your adrenal glands suffering? Why are they not capable or able of sustaining adequate quantities of cortisol? Again, if that's your case. And so backtracking to understand that is going to be the most important thing you can do in the long term. But using vitamin C and an adrenal glandular in the short term might help give you some support to get through that unenduring fatigue. But you want to know, what are the triggers, right? So for a lot of people, what causes adrenal fatigue: the wrong diet, inadequate sleep, inadequate exercise, or too much exercise in some cases, not getting adequate sunshine and sunlight exposure, in chemical exposures. And chemical exposures come in all kinds of flavors and varieties depending on where you live and what you're putting in your body, because some of these chemicals are in your food. The food dyes, preservatives, additives, things of that nature that you really want to try to opt out of. Okay, can functional medicine or functional neurology help patients with schizophrenia? In my experience, yes, and even research. So as an example, there are a number of research studies on schizophrenics going gluten-free and improving symptoms. And so I would look at that as a functional approach, because you got to test for gluten sensitivity, right? So you're looking at food, you're looking at diet as a potential trigger for the cause. But gluten, people with schizophrenia, now I'm not saying all cases of schizophrenia are gluten sensitive, but many of them are, and benefit tremendously by going on a gluten-free diet. And that's been my experience. I've actually had people who had, even beyond schizophrenia, multiple psychotic diagnoses and multiple medications. I had one young man one time, his doctors basically didn't think he'd live past the age of 20, and told his mom he'd probably end up committing suicide before he got there. And anyway, she brought him to me, and he was gluten sensitive, and we took him off of gluten, and within about 2 months, he was able to think again. He was able to clearly, actually, coherently think without hallucination. And going gluten-free radically changed his life. He was on a couple of different drugs for his schizophrenia. Geodon and Abilify were two of them, and we were able to get him off of those medications relatively quickly once he went gluten-free. So again, I've seen it happen in people, and I've also read numerous amounts of research papers on other doctors and researchers who have shown that gluten has correlation with schizophrenia, and diet change can be very impactful. And actually, too, what might be helpful for you, Dennis, Dr. Charles Parker, who's a psychiatrist, who I interviewed, gosh, it's been 10, 15 years ago. Very smart guy. We did a series of interviews together on gluten, schizophrenia, and neurological disease, improvement with diet change. And so they're on our YouTube channel. You might just type in Dr. Charles Parker, on my channel, and see if you can pull up some of those old interviews. But those old interviews are gold, because we had a great time talking. I don't know if he's still practicing, but great guy, and probably one of the better psychiatrists that I know, because he actually honors and appreciates diet as a tool in the tool belt of a physician to help people. Do you have a recommendation for a lab that would be reliable for Lyme disease? Yeah, there are a few different good labs in the country. Trying to think of the one that I'm down in Texas, so we don't see a ton of Lyme, so I can't claim Terry to be the best expert in Lyme. What's the name? I'm just having a brain fart on the actual lab. I'll have to come back. I'll come back to that. Give me a minute and I'll remember it, and I'll announce that lab, and you can go check them out. I tested strongly reactive on LRA panel to mango and rosemary. After 6 months of avoidance, can I try adding them back in? You can, Lois. You can make that attempt. Be careful though, because if you tested positive on an LRA, remember what an LRA is measuring. It's measuring delayed response. Delayed response you don't necessarily feel. Remember, it's a 3 hour to 3 week window of inflammation that can occur, and you don't always feel it, which is why you would do a test like an LRA. So I would just say very cautious, and I probably would say wait 8 months and not 6, and that way 6 months is enough time for your immune system to completely recycle. 8 months is a little bit of buffer zone, and that's generally when somebody comes to see me in my practice, I generally have them avoid them for 8 months before any kind of reintroduction. Does basmati rice have the same gluten as other types? Yes, it does. So the basmati rice is not something I recommend. Remember that pretty much, I don't stand alone in this, but I'm kind of a maverick, Lisa, on this front. Just my research, and I'm not the only one, but like I said, there's a handful of us that find that orzonin, which is the name of the gluten found in rice is not gluten-free. It does contain a type of gluten. It's just that in the celiac literature and most of the celiac educational websites will tell you that rice is gluten-free and that rice is okay to eat, despite the fact that 92% of people following a traditional wheat, barley, rye, gluten-free diet fail to achieve inflammation recovery after as long as 5 years of being on the diet. And one of the reasons we see this happen is because they continue to eat rice, because everybody's telling you to eat rice, that rice is safe. It's just not been the case in my experience in my practice. And so, again, rice is technically not gluten-free. Orzonin is a type of gluten in rice. And so this is one of the reasons why I don't recommend people eat rice. That's why the title of the book is not No Gluten, No Pain. The title of the book is No Grain, No Pain. It's because all grains contain different forms of gluten that people with gluten reactivity react to. Okay. What to do if cytomel causes insomnia? Free T3 is low. Also, can too much Livoxyl suppress free T3? I don't seem to, man, that's a monster question, Raquel. One, let me just preface it by saying I'm not your doctor. Don't take this as medical advice. I'm just going to help you understand a little bit about the biochemistry of this stuff. So if you have insomnia, you may be being over-medicated. You should ask your doctor to measure your TSH along with your T3 and your T4 in both total as well as free T3 and free T4. Now you should also ask for another test. It's called a reverse T3. Ask for that test. A lot of doctors won't run it. Demand it. Because if your reverse T3 is high, what that means is your body is not doing a good job converting T4 into T3. So you could be over-medicating with T4 as an example, but your body can't turn that T4 into T3. That can cause insomnia, and it can elevate your heart rate and drive anxiety, and it can cause hair loss, and it can cause a lot of problems associated with hyperthyroid, but it won't necessarily fix low T3 if you're not converting the T4 into T3. To convert T4 to T3 requires selenium. There's a specialized enzyme. It's a deiodinase enzyme that selenium runs. So selenium is like the car keys that starts the motor that converts T4 to T3. So it's important that you have the complete TSH, T3, T4, reverse T3 picture so that you can better understand the chemistry of what to do and what actions you can take to improve that outcome. So get that testing done first, because if you don't have that testing, you're just guessing, and it's really hard to do that. Okay. What do you think about biopsy procedures? If you're talking about biopsies for celiac, one, I think they're invasive, and so there's a risk, and you have to be willing to want to take that risk. And sometimes that's necessary. I'm not opposed to a biopsy. Two, I think biopsies can be very misleading. Because your small intestine, so when they scope you, we're talking about for celiac disease, they scope you from the mouth and they go into your small intestine and they're going to take biopsies. But your small intestine has a surface area that's equivalent to the size of a tennis court. So it's a pretty vast surface area. When they do a biopsy, they may do 4 samples. It'd be like going on that tennis court and taking 4 little microscopic cross sections of the court and then saying that these little tiny sections represent the whole court. And that's what a biopsy is. It's a search to find villus atrophy and hoping that you will find it, but you may not find it. And that's the problem with the biopsy, is that you can biopsy a normal part of the small intestine, but that doesn't mean the entire small intestine is normal, and so you can get a false negative. The worst I'd ever seen with biopsies is a woman over a multi-decade span had, I think it was 19 biopsies, and that's a lot of biopsies. The 20th one was positive, the first 19 were negative. So it took her decades to get her diagnosis of gluten issues, because the test is not super accurate. Now, if you find villus atrophy when you do a biopsy, and maybe you find it in the first go round, kudos, good luck. That's awesome that you were able to find it. But there was a comment earlier that, the gold standard for diagnosing celiac disease is an archaic mess, and it is, because biopsies are the gold standard, and they shouldn't be, because biopsies, you can get a false negative, but biopsies only identify villus atrophy, and there are more things than gluten that can cause villus atrophy. If you're taking, for example, steroids and non-steroidal anti-inflammatories can damage your GI tract, and you could get a false biopsy. There's certain blood pressure medications that can cause villus atrophy. Parasites can cause villus atrophy. Corn and soy have been shown to cause villus atrophy in some people. So, you do this biopsy, you get a positive result, and the doctor immediately says this is being caused by gluten, and you get a gluten diagnosis. So not only can you get a false negative, but if you do get a positive, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's positive because of gluten. And so that's what I think about biopsies. They're tests that are okay. They can give you some data, but if you're relying on that data to make a major decision and you don't have any other data, you're making a mistake. And that's where unfortunately most GI doctors, they do blood tests for gliadin. They do what's called anti-gliadin antibody test, and gliadin is only one type of gluten found in wheat. Sometimes they do anti-tissue transglutaminase, which is specifically looking for an antibody reaction in the intestine for the most part. And so you may have what's called extraintestinal manifestation of gluten exposure, meaning that gluten doesn't always affect the intestine. So you could have gluten issue and it's affecting your liver. But if they're measuring tissue transglutaminase, they're not necessarily going to find that it comes back positive. So again, you get false negatives a lot of times on the blood work, and they're not comprehensive. You get false negatives on the biopsy, or you get false positives on a biopsy, because biopsy, again, finding villus atrophy doesn't necessitate that gluten is the only reason why that can occur. So you really have to do more than just those two things. And this is part of what I try to do when people come to see me, is we look at all food. We look at food reactions, we look at chemical reactions, we look at nutritional deficit, we look at the status of their microbiome and their GI tract and their ability to digest and absorb. And that's just a baseline starting point. Most doctors just simply do a scope and take a picture. Well, a picture may be worth 1,000 words, but a picture can be very misleading. If you've ever been in a picture where somebody took a bad picture of you and your face was contorted and it's like you weren't as handsome or pretty as you typically are, and then that picture goes up on your profile and it's like, no, that's not really what I look like. Well, think about that next time you think about whether or not you want to do a biopsy, and rely solely on that picture, so to speak, to make a major decision. Let's see here. I took a mycotoxin mold test, and everything came back as 0. I have many symptoms of mold. So Kendra, first of all, you can't use that lab. I'm not going to say their name out loud, but that is not the lab that you want to use when you're doing mycotoxin testing. You're going to get a ton of false negatives from that lab. It's just been my experience. We double-blinded them using many different labs for mycotoxins, and if you really want to do a mycotoxin analysis, you've got to use Real Time. Real Time is a lab out here in Texas where I live. And if you want an accurate assessment, you need to use that test. The other thing you might consider, Kendra, is doing what's called a provocation before you do the test. So go to Gluten-Free Society, type in glutathione. Look, it's called ultra glutathione. And for a week before you do a urine test, you want to take 4 of those capsules a day, and that will help provoke. Because some people, what happens is they're burdened with, and their mycotoxins are in their body. It's just that they're not coming out. So when you measure it in the urine, you're not getting any kind of positive result. You have to sometimes provoke them out, and glutathione is what helps do that. Glutathione amps up the liver to help pull mycotoxins and convert them into water-soluble agents so that they then can be excreted into the urine and you can measure them. And so provocation is sometimes necessary as well. Let's see, any thoughts on the fully plant-based diet? I'm not a fan of a fully plant-based diet. I don't think you can get all of your nutrition from plants alone. And we're seeing that play out as many vegans over years I can't, I'll just say it like this. I'm not going to try to criminalize any of you who are on a vegan diet and tell you you're a bad person and you're doing it wrong, because there are many reasons why people go to a plant-based diet. And I understand that. I love animals, and but I also will eat them because I love myself enough to know that I need to eat them in order to nourish myself so that I can be the best me and help as many people as I possibly can. And that being said, some people have a hard time wrapping their mind and getting over that thing. And some people are stuck in the realm of, I don't want to eat meat because of the way they treat the animals. Well, I mean, in that case, go buy grass-fed, free range, grass-fed, pastured animals where the farmers are small batch and they're taking great care of their animals, and the animals are not just stuck in a pen, lying in their own feces all day. That we don't want to support that kind of farming. I agree, 100%. If you're an animal advocate, I agree with you. I wouldn't eat that meat either. But when you're eating healthy meat grown in a healthy way, that, in my opinion, is a good idea, because meat is a primary source of many nutrients that you're not going to get adequate amounts of if you're sticking to a strictly vegan plant-based diet. And vitamin B12 is one of those examples, but B6 is not as, you don't get enough B6, you don't get enough methionine, you don't get enough zinc, you don't get enough iron, you don't get enough B12. I mean, there are many nutrients that are not as obtainable from plants alone. Now, that being said, I'm also not a carnivore person where you have to eat all meat. I think God created all of these things, and we have this wonderful balance and milieu of different foods that we can choose from, and I think we should. I think we should try to eat a diversity of different things. Now, there are some people that do better with less meat for sure. There are certain genetic parameters that can be measured that help us understand who those people are, and I think that's really where it's at. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all diet approach that people can take, although some people would say, then why do you promote no grain, no pain? Well, because I'm generalizing. But if I were working with you in a one-on-one session, in a one-on-one fashion, I would test you specifically so that we'd know exactly what kind of diet that you should be following, as opposed to trying to generalize based on my experience. Because my experience is largely with autoimmune disease, and with autoimmune disease, grain is one of the primary drivers of autoimmunity, and that's why my stance is generalized and no grain, no pain. But in a one-on-one scenario, you really got to get testing done to understand what kind of diet you should follow. So Pamela says, I did the food testing through you. One to avoid is red chili. I have chilies growing, but they start out green and eventually turn red. Does that mean I can eat them before they turn red? No, it does not mean that. So yeah, no go on that. Remedy to heal hemorrhoids. Probably one of the best things you can do to support your body's ability to overcome hemorrhoids is fasting. Water fast, or broth or liquid fasts, where where you don't strain the bowels. Now, if you're dealing with constipation and the hemorrhoids are being caused as a result of that force or that pressure, then you really want to go backwards and find out why you're constipated. And there are a lot of reasons why people can be constipated. Some of the more common reasons or causes of constipation. One would be eating foods you're allergic to, because they can neurologically damage peristalsis in your gut. I mean, there's a condition that gluten causes called gastroparesis, which leads to the gut being backed up and severe constipation. And so, foods can do that. And you have to identify what foods may be driving, your bowel function. There's also, constipation is also commonly caused by low acid and low digestive enzymes. So you can ask your doctor to measure those and see where you fall. And if you're low, you can support yourself with digestive enzymes and acids to help better break your food down and to help move that food through your GI tract, because poor digestion is a common cause of constipation. And then there's the simple things like fiber and water that, in my experience, fiber is overrated as a cure for constipation. Most people don't have constipation because of fiber deficiency. What are your thoughts on salt water, pools, hot tubs, if my levels are high in bromine? I don't like high bromine because bromine interferes with iodine uptake into your thyroid. So as far as pools are concerned, I think part of it just depends on if your levels are high. And if your levels are high and your hot tub or your pool is high in bromine, then I would look at other ways to reduce that exposure. One thing, there are several kinds of filters that you can buy for pools and saunas that are silver and copper based, which what those types of filters can do is reduce the need for chemicals like bromine and chlorine, right? Because what are you trying to ultimately do? You're trying to prevent your pool from turning green, right? From turning into an algae fest. So you use copper and silver because it reduces the growth, and so it reduces how much bromine and chlorine you might need to add as a chemical agent to your pool to keep it clean and clear. So those are two things that I would encourage you to look into. So Alice says, my pancreatic enzymes went from 175 to 69. Creon has raw pig porcine from China, vegetarian source made from fungus. I got severe outbreak from it. How to restore pancreatic enzymes naturally? You have to find out why your pancreas is broken. It's a very common thing that gluten causes pancreatic inflammation and reduces pancreatic output. And remember, the pancreas has two functions. One, it produces insulin, which is its endocrine function, and then the pancreas also produces digestive enzymes and bicarbonate, which is its exocrine function. And if the pancreas is inflamed, it won't do those functions as effectively. And so, is there a food trigger? Is there a chemical trigger? Do you have nutritional deficits that are not allowing you to produce enzymes effectively? These are things that you want to look into, ask your doctor to measure with you so that you can have a better understanding of what might be driving your pancreas into poor function. So PCOS and Hashimoto's thyroiditis with oily poop, what should I do? Go gluten-free. Simplest answer, both of those conditions are autoimmune, and most likely you have a gluten reaction. Oily poop is a sign of fat malabsorption, and gluten also causes fat malabsorption. So I would say start with a healthy gluten-free diet. And if you don't know what that means, read No Grain, No Pain, or go over and visit me at Gluten Free Society, sign up for our newsletter, and I'll give you plenty of information that will help you understand exactly what that means. I have antibodies for autoimmune. I'm gluten-free. Do have hypothyroidism, vitiligo, rheumatoid symptoms help? So you've got to go dig deeper, Joni. If you're already gluten-free, caveat to that, are you truly gluten-free or are you traditional gluten-free? Traditional gluten-free means you're not eating wheat, barley, and rye. True gluten-free means you're not eating wheat, barley, rye, corn, rice, sorghum, oats, teff, millet, the other grains. Okay, so again, traditional definition is you only have to avoid wheat, barley, and rye, but that, in my opinion, is nobody ever gets better just doing that. So it may be that you need to take your gluten-free diet and ramp it up to a grain-free diet. Beyond that, you got to test for other foods. You could have other food triggers. It's very common in those diseases that you mentioned to have other food triggers. For example, RA, it's very common for people with RA to react to the family of vegetables called nightshades. And so that may be another thing that's driving your antibodies. You may also have vitamin and mineral deficiencies that need to be corrected. And so getting those tested would be a good step, a good important step to do. But look for the other triggers, because gluten can solve, for a lot of people, going gluten-free solves a lot of their issues, but when you hit that plateau, there usually are other triggers that have to be investigated with autoimmunity. And remember, categorically, that's food, chemicals, microbes, and nutritional deficiencies are those 4 categories. And if you're not familiar inherently with what all those things are, make sure you're watching. Right now, we're in the middle of a series on autoimmune recovery. And so we can put a link up to parts 1 and 2. And then this coming up Tuesday, we're going to be doing part 3, the final part in the series. So make sure you check those out. They're free for you, and they might just save your life. Is there a mild digestive enzyme for people with ulcers? Yeah, try Ultra Digest. We'll put a link below for you, Ultra Digest. Can supplements be sent from, if you're talking about it, can Gluten-Free Society supplements be sent to Europe and Italy? Not currently. I mean, we don't have a mechanism in place for international shipping at this time, unless you're talking about DNA testing. We do ship DNA testing to everywhere across the globe, but we don't ship supplements currently. We're working on something. Just stay patient with me. So Ala's asking, so what Ala was asking earlier is that she's gluten-free but still struggling, but she's still eating quinoa and rice. And so, the question is, what do I eat to replace quinoa and rice with? We have a page, a pretty extensive article on all the foods that are safe for people following a clean gluten-free diet. If you go to Gluten-Free Society, maybe can we find that link? I think it's, trying to remember the exact name of the article, but it's Healthy Foods on a Gluten-Free Diet, I think is the name of the article, or something along those lines. And if we find it for you, Alla, we'll put that link into the feed for you. Let's see. What would you recommend for a teenager that developed postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS? I'd recommend vitamin B12 if I were guessing, because it's very common to see B12 deficiency in POTS diagnosed individuals. I'd also recommend a gluten-free diet. I've seen people with POTS do really, really well and improve dramatically with a gluten-free diet. I mean, those would be 2 places to start. I've done some videos on POTS that you might want to go check out as well. You just have to search for them on our YouTube channel. What's my opinion on stevia? Does it cause heart attacks? No, it doesn't cause heart attacks. What is a good source for a sore throat and headache? Okay, so this is 3 questions. So what is good for a sore throat and headaches? My favorite thing to use for a sore throat, if you suspect like in a virus or a bacteria or something, is silver spray. We have something called Ultra Silver, and you just 5 squirts to the back of the throat, kind of gargle it and hold it there for 30 seconds, and do that 3-4 times a day. I swear by it. It works really, really well. If I ever wake up with a sore throat, it's one of the first things I do. Actually, I have a bottle of silver on my bedside table. As far as headache, that's a massive question, because there's a lot of reasons why people can have headaches. I mean, I'd suggest, 1, go see a good chiropractor and get a diagnosis. What kind of headache are we talking about? Is it a migraine? Is it a cluster? Is it a cervicogenic headache? Is it a tension headache? Is it a neurological headache? There are different triggers for headaches. Now, I can put a link below. We have an entire article on the food and chemical triggers for headaches, and you might go through that list and just see, okay, are any of those things you need to be paying attention to? But headache's a big one, because there's just a lot of reasons why it can happen. What do I think about infrared saunas? I like them. I have one. I think they're a fantastic idea if you are limited in your ability to go outside and get sunshine on a regular basis. I think they're a great idea if you're trying to detox, especially if you've been in mold for any length of time and you're coming out of mold and you're trying to get those mold toxins out of you. I think infrared's a fantastic way to go about doing that. But I like infrared. Now, one of the things a lot of people depend heavily on devices. So I will just say this. So like there's infrared, there's far and near infrared, first of all. So there's red light therapy, and then there's also other kinds of light therapy, and then there's electrostim, and there's all kinds of devices people can use to improve or to help support their health. And I'm not knocking any of them, but I think far too often we rely on devices instead of our own devices, right? And so what could you do that would, in my opinion, be far better than infrared if you did it on a regular basis? You could go out and exercise and sweat. You know, when you generate your own heat, especially if you're exercising where you're also getting sun exposure, okay? Because everything you can get from infrared, you can walk outside and get for free, right? The device that we already have. And some people spend thousands of dollars on infrared units. I mean, going outside is free for you. So don't forget, you know, the 6 fundamentals of good health, and one of them is going outside and getting natural light exposure, and that natural light contains infrared for free without having to use a sauna. So take advantage of that free therapy. I drink a bunch of water, but I am still dehydrated. My doctor says I'm dehydrated. Why exactly would I be dehydrated if I drink a lot of water? Can you go down a little bit on that comment? If I drink a ton of water, is it, what happened?
I think it's possible that I'm depleting my electrolytes.
Yeah, okay, so if you're dehydrated and you drink a ton of water and you've had lab testing and it confirms you're dehydrated, number one, if you're drinking reverse osmosis filtered water, you might consider adding electrolytes back to it, because drinking RO water, remember, RO filters pull electrolytes out of the water. So when you drink only RO water, you could actually dehydrate yourself if you're not putting those electrolytes back in. We have a product called Ultra Electrolytes for that very purpose. When I'm in my office, I have an RO filter, and so, you know, I have a bottle of electrolytes right there, so I can just add it back to my water. At home, I'm on a well, so if you're on a well, or if you're not drinking RO water per se, you don't really need to worry about electrolytes and adding them back in. You might also consider adding more salt into your diet, natural salt like Himalayan salt or sea salt, because those are things that sometimes people don't get enough of, because we've all been told to avoid salt because it causes high blood pressure, and that's not really true, but that's what we've been told. So if you're not using salt or salting your food, you might consider doing more of that, especially if you're a heavy sweater. You know, I see a lot of people who are heavy sweaters. They sweat a lot more than the average person. You know, that requires more fluid, but specifically more electrolyte-filled fluid. So consider adding that electrolyte back into your mix and seeing if that doesn't help, Jacqueline. Let's scroll down a little bit there. On Tuesday, you said to avoid rice bran oil. Can you recommend a lotion that doesn't have it? There's a lot of different brands that don't have it. Off the top of my head, one of my favorite hydrators of the skin, there's two really. One is shea butter, SHEA, and the other is jojoba oil, JOJOBO. Neither one contain rice bran oil, and both will moisturize your skin quite well. Can you get your book translated in French? Man, we have tried. The problem, Lynn, is that my publisher, Simon & Schuster, they're in charge of that, not me. So if it were up to me, I would just say translate it in every language. But it's not up to me, it's up to them. And so what they have to do is, I'm not even involved in it, but there are these back-end deals they have to make with French publishing companies. So if you know a French publishing company that would love to publish No Grain, No Pain, you send me their contact information, and I'll forward that on to my publisher, and we'll see if they can work out a deal. But that's the way it has to happen. Unfortunately, I don't have any control over what language it gets published in. Hello from Norway. Lymphocyte proliferation. I don't think any doctor here understands what it means. I told that you should take a measurement in lymphocytes or erythrocytes. How to explain in an easy way on how to do it? You know, if the doctor doesn't know how to do it, they don't know how to do it. I don't know how to explain it in an easy way, because it's not rocket science. If you're a doctor, these are understandings that you should have. That's just the way I view it. The best thing I can tell you is we're getting ready to publish a page where people can buy lymphocyte proliferation testing direct to consumer. We've been working on this now for over a year, and I'm hoping we're going to have it available in other countries like that. I'm fairly certain that we are going to have it available no matter where you live in the world and the globe. But be patient with me. We'll make an announcement soon. And that's the best I can do, because if your doctors don't understand, first of all, I always say if your doctor doesn't understand the test and the methodology, then they're not going to be able to interpret it. And if they can't interpret it, you certainly, don't want to rely on them running it for you, because part of it is the interpretation. And so to me, it just makes comments. It's kind of like if you went to a money manager and you said, help me understand the difference between stocks and bonds, and they said, oh, I never heard of bonds before, but I could sell you some bonds, and it wouldn't make sense to buy it from that person because they're just not an expert. And that's kind of, I don't know. I know that's not helpful for you, and I apologize, but I don't know what else to tell you, because if they don't understand, the problem with most doctors is they don't train in nutrition, and so they don't understand nutrition, and unless they have an external desire to really learn more, you're not going to put something on their plate that's going to make them change their mind or make them do something they don't understand. I'm bloating after having fiber, example, flaxseed in water or drinking smoothies. How can I reduce the bloating? Take the fiber out, Debbie. Fiber's not right for everybody. That's a myth. Everybody talks about you got to get enough fiber to prevent cancers of the colon, and yes, there's some truth to that, but we can't say that that's universally true. And some people don't do fiber very well. It actually is more damaging and detrimental to them. So if you're finding that you're bloating severely with fiber, then take the fiber out and stop bloating. Do you have a baseline lab test that you want to check? It depends on, yeah, you're right, Gaia. It depends. So do I have a baseline lab test that I want to check with people? The baselines that I like to see in everyone are what you should eat, what foods you're reactive to, what nutrients you're deficient in, what is the functionality of your GI tract, how well is it digesting and absorbing functionally, and for what chemical exposures that you have that we're aware of that we can then help you understand and get out of your environment and your diet. Those 4 things are fundamental, and I test those. It doesn't matter who you are. If you come to see me, those 4 things get tested hands down every time. And if somebody comes to see me and they don't want those things tested, they're wasting their time, because I'm not going to see somebody who doesn't want objective data. That's just not how I work. When people come to, you can guess all you want by asking your questions on the show and tuning into the show and our emails. That's guessing and that's generalizing. But when people come to me, we throw away the generalization and we get laser focused and we hone in on objectivity, and we use laboratory and technology to provide those types of answers. When are you doing the show on mold protocol? It's coming, Lynn. I don't know the exact date, but I know it's on our calendar, so just hang in there and keep watching. What are your thoughts on colostrum for healing the gut? Doctor wants son to take for 2 months to help heal leaky gut. My son's been wheat-free for 2 to 3 years, still has constipation and skin issues, so now we're working on grain-free. Plus cutting out other foods from MRT blood tests. So I think colostrum can be beneficial or helpful, but if a person has a dairy reaction, I don't like colostrum. Actually, we have a product called Immune Shield, which is a non-colostrum product, but it is similar to colostrum. It's actually it's from bovine. It's a serum bovine product that contains surrogate antibodies and immune-supporting nutrients. And so that's what I would use, because especially if your son's not grain-free yet. Because generally speaking, when a person has not gone truly gluten grain-free, there can be crossover reactivity to dairy and dairy products. And so it's a very common thing for people to need to be dairy-free for that first 6 to 8 months or so when they're going grain-free. And if your son hasn't fully gone grain-free yet, then colostrum wouldn't be my first pick. If I were seeing him, my first pick would be something other than that. An Immune Shield would be what we would use. Are there any good books on gluten and schizophrenia? A lot of good research, but I haven't read any great books. It doesn't mean there aren't any. I'm just not aware of any ones in particular. But one of my favorite psychiatrists on schizophrenia and natural medicine is Abram Hoffer, who passed away a few years ago. He was a brilliant doctor. And he actually talks a lot about vitamin C and niacin, high doses of niacin. He developed something called the adrenochrome hypothesis, and you can go read more about it in his books. But one of his really good books to get started on would be it's called Adventures in Psychiatry, and his name is Abram Hoffer. But he doesn't specifically go into gluten so much as he goes into the vitamins. Why is soy and soy products so bad for us? Several reasons, and it's not necessarily that it's bad for everyone per se, but 99% of the soy grown in the US is GMO and it's got glyphosate in it, so you definitely don't want that in your diet. But many people one of the bigger reasons why soy can be problematic, if glyphosate aside, let's say you're buying organic soy, is that soy is very, very, very difficult to digest. And so somebody that's got years of gluten-induced gastrointestinal damage or pancreatic damage, they're trying to use soy as a staple in their diet, they're not going to digest it very well. It's going to create a lot of potential for dysbiosis and leaky gut. So that's one of the bigger reasons why you would want to keep soy out, especially if you're new to the diet. What's the reason for elevations in thyroid peroxidase or antibody, TPO antibodies? One of the biggest reasons is gluten. Now, other foods can do it. I've seen other foods trigger elevations in TPO. I've also seen mold trigger elevations in TPO, and heavy metals trigger elevations in TPO. So I would start with, just saying those things. So maybe look at other potential for reacting to other foods, and again, looking at the potential for maybe there's other chemicals that are there that are creating an issue for you. Doctor, you said about taking intestinal defense during a full moon cycle when having farm animals. How long does a full moon cycle last? We take it for about 5 days at home. So check I don't know if you have, Jessica, if you have a farmer's almanac, but that is a great place to learn about moon cycles and to get more information too. Okay. Sometimes I get aggressive after taking B vitamins. Is that a sign I'm undermethylating? Yeah, it could also be a sign you're in mold. A lot of if they're methylated, if your B vitamins are methylated. A lot of people I see get really agitated and aggressive taking B vitamins. They don't do well with them when there's a mold issue in their home or at their job. I've acquired white flashes. You mean hot flashes? White flashes in your peripheral, I assume you mean vision then, peripheral views on both eyes. Since my last eye exam, I was told by the doctor as a result of floaters. Yeah, I mean, you can develop floaters peripherally in your eyes. That wouldn't be, but I wouldn't describe that as white flashes. Generally, floaters aren't flashes. Flashes would be more like almost like a migraine symptom, Mary. And to me, there may be a trigger, like a migraine trigger that you're being exposed to. So I would say the same thing I said to I can't remember who it was earlier, but I think we put a link to migraine triggers. You might check that out and see if making some of those adjustments causes a reduction in what you're experiencing. My husband has low red blood cells. What do you recommend to take? So I would recommend that, with low red blood cells, there are a lot of reasons why that happens, but it's a form of anemia, Lily. And B12 deficiency can cause it, folate deficiency can cause it, B6 deficiency can cause it, zinc deficiency can cause it, iron deficiency can cause it. So get your husband's nutrition status checked so that you can figure out which of those. Because if I'm just guessing and just throwing out a general guess, I would start with B12, but I could be wrong there. There are, like I said, there are other reasons blood cells can be low, red blood cells can be low. So somebody recommended buckwheat instead of rice, and I will just make a correction here, and that's not to call that person out, it's just simply to say that buckwheat is not something that I advise as a substitute for rice if you're trying to follow a true gluten-free diet. A true gluten-free diet does not contain buckwheat, quinoa, or amaranth. Those are what are called pseudograins, and they have a high propensity toward cross-reacting with regular grains, so not something I recommend. My family from my mother's side suffer from a lot of food allergies and autoimmune disease. Can gluten be the cause of these issues? Absolutely. Gluten, Christina, is the most well-studied, scientifically agreed upon trigger for autoimmune disease, period. So it's always a good place where there's a lot of autoimmunity. You can never go wrong with starting with gluten. It's just a really great place to start, and doesn't cost you any money to just change your diet. So definitely could be the cause. My eardrums are prone to breaking on airplanes due to scar tissue from ear infections. Any suggestions to prevent? Yeah, go to a good chiropractor, Melanie, and have them, before you get on a plane, have them adjust your ears. There's a method where you can have your ears adjusted, and what it can do is it can open up your eustachian tubes, and that allows for better drainage. A lot of times when you get on that plane and there's a pressure change, that fluid can push into the eardrum. You've got scar tissue, boom, you get it busted. But if you allow that drainage to occur first, you can take away some of that pressure, and it might reduce the risk of that happening for you. Is adrenal fatigue caused by too much or too little cortisone? So it's both. It's one of those things where initially the early stages of adrenal fatigue, we're going to see cortisol being high. And in the later stages of adrenal fatigue, we're going to see the cortisol dropping. So it depends on what stage of adrenal fatigue that you're in. Now, you mentioned the word cortisone, so just point of clarity, if you're taking cortisone as a drug, what that can do over time is it can cause your own adrenal glands to atrophy. And that's why long-term steroid dosing is never really a great idea. And that's just something you would want to talk to your doctor about if that's the case. I'm not clear with your question whether or not that's what you meant. Does having increased intraepithelial lymphocytes mean I have celiac disease even though a blood test was negative? No, it doesn't mean that you have celiac disease, but it is one of the signs of celiac disease. You remember, gluten can cause intraepithelial lymphocytosis, but so can other foods. So again, it's a test that tells you that most likely you are reacting to something that you're eating, but it's not specific for what you're reacting to, and that's where you need to go deeper. If you've been tested for blood tests for celiac disease, that's a bad test. Blood tests for celiac disease oftentimes yield a negative result, and this can confuse people and make them think they can continue to eat gluten, and so they continue to eat it, and they continue to go on damaging their intestines. So genetic testing is what I recommend. If you really want to have an accurate understanding of whether or not going gluten-free is a smart thing for you to do, get the genetic testing done, because your genes don't change. You don't have to eat gluten to do the test, and the test is not going to yield you necessarily a false negative that will stray you from the path of a gluten-free diet for years and years and years. And right now, I think that if there's a promo code for DNA testing, if it's something that you wanted to do, Nikki. Do we have that, Mel? Do you know? If you get my emails, and that you should have received that earlier today, if you get my emails. But right now I think it's 20% off when you do order a genetic test, or when you order a food sensitivity test through Gluten Free Society. So those of you who are on the fence and been thinking about doing it, now would be a great time to do it, where you could save yourself a little bit of money and still get the information to help you navigate your diet.
Code test.
Oh, it's test, just test?
Correct.
Yeah, so if you use the promo code TEST, T-E-S-T, you'll save 20%. Maybe we could put a link up to those two tests for people too. Okay, yeah, we'll put that link up for you, Nikki. Let's see here. No, that's not quite. Been no grain, no pain for 8 months. Blood work shows high red blood cells, high hematocrit, high A1C. Feel better than I have for a long time. Should I worry? Kathy, high red blood cell, high hematocrit, you might have been dehydrated on the day of the test, and so you have an artificially high elevation there. So the best thing to do, whether or not you should be worried, is just get it rechecked in a few months and see if it's still high. If it's still high, you might talk to your doctor about hemochromatosis. I don't know if this is the first time you've ever had high levels, but hemochromatosis is when people don't, it's when they accumulate iron in their tissues, and that's not a good thing because too much iron can be oxidative and create problems. So it could be a problem and it may not be, but it may just be a fluke of the test, and so I'd get it retested first. As far as the high A1C is concerned, what is high? Is it borderline high? Is it really high? Is it over 6? Is it over 6.5? Where is it falling? Because A1C, that's diabetes, and maybe if you've been grain-free now, is your A1C high, but it was higher before? Which is my experience with a lot of folks, is that when they come in, their A1Cs are 7+, and then they go grain-free. Guess what happens? Boom, we're now down in the 6s, but they're still a little bit high. It's hard to comment, but I'm glad you're feeling better. But I would monitor that A1C because that could be a sign, an infortuitous sign that your body's shifting into kind of a diabetic mode, and you want to try to avoid that and prevent that. And so sometimes what also will drive up your A1C is chromium deficiency or vitamin B3 or magnesium or zinc deficiencies can do it. So again, those are just other areas you might want to investigate. Just a comment, Dr. Amen is a great psychiatrist, neuroscientist. Yeah, he is. He's got a lot of really good stuff too. I think he talks a little bit about gluten, but I think he does a lot more brain imaging about dementia and antioxidants than anything else. I don't think his focus is solely gluten. Because that going back to the question about somebody who was asking about a psychiatrist that talks about gluten and schizophrenia. But Eamon's done great work. I just don't know if that's his focus. Can I take more than the magnesium upper limit if I don't experience any symptoms and I know I'm deficient short term? That depends, because what you're calling the upper limit and what I'm thinking of being the upper limit may not match. So it's hard for me to answer that question directly. I've seen people be real solid taking 1,000 milligrams of magnesium a day for short periods of time, for a few months. But where you can get into trouble with higher doses of magnesium for too long is it can actually start making you tired and groggy and brain foggy, and it can have that effect on certain people. So I would just say, definitely be careful, and it's probably best to answer that question would be best to go to your doctor and have your levels checked. You may not be able to get lymphocyte levels checked, but one test that your doctor should be able to do is an erythrocyte or a red blood cell magnesium, and that might give you that's going to give you a more accurate indicator as to whether or not using it at higher levels is smart or not smart. What's your opinion on alcohol's effect on health? It's not good. Pretty simple. Yeah, you saw my shirt. Look, I don't think alcohol is healthy. I'm not gonna mince any words. It's not good for you. Do I drink it sometimes? Yes. And I think there's a place for alcohol socially. I think if you're gluten sensitive, you should choose grain-free types of alcohol if you're going to drink it. But if you're sick and you're trying to recover from illness, I think it's a mistake to use alcohol. If you're healthy and you're enjoying some alcohol on a social occasion, I think it's fine. Now, I think part of that defines what occasion means to you, because some people tell me I drink a little bit of wine sometimes, and then when I dig deeper, the answer is I drink 2 to 3 glasses a night. That's not a little bit of wine. That borders on alcoholism, right? So, personally myself, I drink alcohol once or twice a month max, and usually I'll go months and months without any of it before I have some in some kind of social setting or environment. So my opinion on alcohol as being healthy is that don't kid yourself, it's not. All the marketers will tell you that wine is rich in antioxidants, but I'll tell you that wine is rich in alcohol, which damages your liver, and wine is rich in glyphosate, which damages your GI tract, and it's also rich in other chemical preservatives like sulfites that are not good for you. So alcohol is not good for you. Again, social occasion, I do. Some people don't because it makes them feel so bad and they don't want to do it. I think again, you got to make a good judgment call. But if you're sick Alcohol's not going to help you dig out of that hole. Okay, let's see here. C-peptide low at 170 while glucose is high and low irregularly. What is not working? It's not enough information. So C-peptide being low means your pancreas might be underperforming on its ability to produce insulin. Glucose being high can mean a lot of different things depending on whether you got your test when you were fasted or when you were stressed. It's hard to understand about blood sugar if you don't know also about cortisol. It's hard to know about blood sugar regulation if you don't know about pancreatic inflammation or if you don't know about certain vitamins and minerals that regulate it. So what you're giving me doesn't give me enough to really give you a great opinion. Now, Sarah, what you may do, I have a video called What Your Doctor Will Never Tell You About Blood Sugar, and you might go watch that and you'll learn a lot more about the nutrition regulation of blood sugar, and that might be helpful. But with the information you've given me, I don't have enough to really help you. Yeah, so this the same person keeps commenting, about pseudograins. Look, quit commenting about pseudograins being good for people when you're on my channel. Like if my message doesn't suit you, then go away. But don't spread information that's going to be confusing, Carib, to people on this channel who are trying to find their health, and now they're reading your comments about quinoa, buckwheat, and amaranth, in direct conflict to what I've already said. So just back off, go away, or just be quiet. You're in my yard, you're in my neighborhood. We don't need your commentary in that way. Go make your own show and you can talk about how great those things are and you can educate as many people as you would like to, but please don't confuse the people that are here that have their faith and trust in me on a weekly basis. I appreciate that. Hello, doctor. Greetings from Germany. What do you think about taking turmeric after going gluten-free? I think turmeric for some can be helpful. I think, I personally don't take turmeric. It's not something I recommend in every person going gluten-free. It can be a strong anti-inflammatory and in some cases can be helpful for people that have inflammatory bowel issues. But some people also have an oxalate problem, and taking a lot of turmeric might be contraindicated in those individuals. So, but I'm not opposed to turmeric. Any update on Warrior Bread batch for sale? I think it's April is when we're expecting it back. So check back in April. We should have it back in stock then. Wild rice. So another question about wild rice. Wild rice is a grass, not a grain. So grain is defined as the seed of grass, but a grass is the actual stem, and wild rice is actually a grass stem. Can hydrolyzed collagen keep your microbiome healthy? I think there's a lot of things that your microbiome needs. Hydrolyzed collagen, I haven't read any research that says that you need hydrolyzed collagen for your microbiome specifically, but hydrolyzed collagen can be very beneficial for collagen formation in your body. So your joints, your bones, your muscles, your skin, your blood vessels, all made with a backbone of collagen. So I'm a fan of collagen, just not necessarily something that I think is 100% microbiome necessary. Let's see. A question, can high protein, what's that question down at the bottom? There you go. Can high protein food intake to try and grow more muscles be the cause for a high albumin globulin ratio? It can be if your high protein intake is raising your albumin. It can be. Should I cut back my protein, or is it okay short term? It's okay short term, and really, if you're really worried about high protein, a number to really look at would be your 24-hour creatinine. If it's really impacting your 24-hour urinary creatinine, because you can have creatinine measured in the blood, but it's not as accurate when you measure it in the blood as if you're measuring the kidney output over a 24-hour period of time. And if your creatinine levels are dramatically changing with a high protein diet, you might consider backing off the high protein. But generally speaking, it also depends on what you mean by high protein, because what some people call high protein, I would call normal protein. Like it's, the average human needs about, 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per day per kilogram of body weight. And, most doctors recommend 0.6 grams of protein a day per kilogram body weight, which in my opinion causes protein malnourishment and is a bad thing. So I think it depends on what you mean by high protein too. Would I recommend a neti pot for sinus cleansing? Yes, I think neti pots are great. What do you recommend adding to the water? Well, they make little salt packs that you can put in the water is what I would generally recommend so that you don't dry out your sinuses. Now, what some people will do for cleansing is they'll put 1 or 2 drops of essential oil sometimes in their neti pot, just something that if you suspect like congestion, it's maybe mold or fungal in nature, like so adding a couple of drops of thyme oil or something along that line, and that can be effective to help cleanse out your sinuses too. But you don't need to do that. If you're just trying to drain your sinuses, a good neti pot with some saline is the way to go. Do you know balsamico? Is it okay to put on? If you're talking about balsamic vinegar, yeah, it's okay. It's higher in sugar, but as far as it being gluten-free, it's fine. Maria's asking a follow-up question on the adrenal. So if you're using my product, Ultra Adrenal Support, 2 caps twice a day would be just kind of a good general recommendation place to start. Is gluten-free society down, Mel?
No, I just checked it. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't know, Jessica, what the problem you're having is. If you can't get to Ultra MG, just call my office and we can take care of you. Thoughts on nuts hurting hip joints, maybe inflammation? They can. Some people are more reactive to nuts than others. I mean, one of the rules that we adhere to with nuts is again, nuts are super high omega-6. And when you're talking about joint inflammation, too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3 will shift the balance into an inflammatory favor. And so I see a lot of people eating heavy nuts. Either they're grain-free, they've replaced everything that was grain with like almond flour or other nut flours or nut butters. And again, that driving up that omega-6 can sometimes be problematic. So, one thing you can do, Barbara, is ask your doctor to run a test called an omega check, where they're looking at your omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acid ratios to determine whether or not you are too high 6. Because if you're too high 6, that can definitely be an exacerbatory factor. Now, some people are allergic or sensitive to nuts, and that can be another reason why they might have inflammation as a result. But it could be either case. I like hearing that. Denny says, my serotonin level has improved immensely since starting No Grain, No Pain. Fist bump. That's great. I don't understand your question, Mohammed. Doc answers to taking meds, have been tested, so they safe? I don't know if there's a language barrier, but I'm not quite sure if I understand your question. Is baking soda gluten-free? Or Mary Ellen wants to know, is baking soda gluten-free? Some of them are and some of them aren't. You have to look at the ingredients, because sometimes baking soda contains corn derivative. I've also seen them contain wheat derivative. Some baking sodas are made with arrowroot, which would be okay. Some are made with potato starch. If you do okay with potato, that would be okay. But you got to read your ingredients, because not all baking sodas contain the same things. Any success in helping people taper from benzos? Yes. Lots of success. What's the right dose? Let's see, I answered that one. Am I a proponent or an opponent of milk products? Some say it's inflammatory. Should I avoid cheese and I don't know what CO dot is. Should I avoid cheese? Look, I'm not a fan of dairy if you're new to all of this. Dairy and gluten, the protein casein and the protein gluten have a lot of cross-reactivity, and so if you're reacting to one, it's very likely you're reacting to both. And so for many people, they need to go completely dairy-free for 6-8 months as an initial step. And then if they're not allergic to dairy, which we also test them for, if they're not allergic to it, then we may try to reintroduce it 6-8 months out. But when we reintroduce it, it's got to be a specific kind. It's what we would call A2 dairy, not A1 milk or A1 cheese, A2, which is a specific kind of dairy with a different form of casein that tends to be less immunoreactive in folks. Russ is asking, do you have a cost sheet for your different services? Well, Gluten-Free Society, you can see any products that we have for sale there. The costs are there. But if you're specifically wanting to know about my services, Russ, just call my office, 281-240-2229, and talk to one of my team, and they can give any information that you need. We're an open book, so all you have to do is call and ask. Do I recommend thyroid medicine once TSH reaches a certain level? You mean if TSH goes too high, do I recommend thyroid medicine? It depends. It depends on the situation. I mean, generally speaking, TSH, the reference range is 0.5 to 4.5. So, if a person's TSH is 5, do I recommend it? I might recommend they follow up with an endocrinologist. And kind of have a watch and wait attitude. But Brandy, in my opinion, I always recommend diet and lifestyle first. I mean, it would be different. Like if somebody had a TSH that was, above 15 and they were on the floor and they couldn't function, yeah, I would send them out to endocrinologists, and I would definitely get them looked at and have them do a workup. But it just depends on what you mean. Just got my liver ultrasound this week and totally cured my fatty liver, going 100% gluten-free diet change. That's awesome, Denise. That is so awesome. Thank you for sharing. Maybe somebody else on here's got a fatty liver and they're debating about going gluten-free. Maybe you just changed their mind. That's fantastic. Do I recommend to eat oats? No, oats have gluten in them. The name of the gluten in oats is called avenin, and it's very inflammatory for people that are trying to go gluten-free and recover. "12 days ago, I tried to megadose niacin because I have schizophrenia. I really messed up my stomach, had to go back on my meds. I think I was not eating enough. What do you think?" Hard to say, Tony. Niacin, megadose, what do you mean by megadose, first of all? Because niacin can irritate the stomach at really high doses. Taking it with food may have changed that a little bit. If you took it on an empty stomach. But a lot of times too, it's best not to start on niacin as a megadose. It can, in my experience, it's better to kind of taper up. So start low, start 100 milligrams, and then kind of work your way up as you tolerate it, because everybody's ability to tolerate is different. And so you have to keep that in mind as you're trying to navigate niacin and schizophrenia. Again, read Dr. Abram Hoffer's work if you haven't already. Can drinking too much black organic coffee every day be bad for one's health in the long run? Actually, there's some really good research that shows that 1 cup of coffee a day actually is good for people, and they live longer. So I'm not opposed to coffee. The biggest problems with coffee are mycotoxins because of the way it's grown. So you want to buy a brand that tests for mold and mycotoxins. The other issue with coffee is pesticides. So if you're using organic and mold-tested coffee, I think you're fine at a cup a day, depending the size of your cup. If the cup is, a regular size cup, you're fine. I think that a lot of people use coffee as a milk and sugar delivery system, and that's not coffee. That's coffee with milk and sugar, which is not good for you. The other people will use too much coffee. So, the pot a day drinker, 20 plus ounces a day, which can become damaging. So it's like think of coffee as a dose response curve. At 1 cup, you got some good benefit, but if you keep going up, that detriment starts to set in. So 1 cup a day is where I would recommend people keep it. Have you seen salivary stones in gluten sensitive? Yeah, I just actually talked about that Tuesday. Denny, you go back and watch Tuesday's show. I actually showed a clinical picture of a person with that problem, that where once we removed gluten, they recovered it, or it went away. Will you have any sales on your gluten genetic test coming up? I think I did. I did. I'm deja vu. Joni's asking. So Joni, what is the promo code, Mel? Test, T-E-S-T, type that in. It's on sale right now, 20% off. It's the lowest cost you'll ever get on DNA testing from Gluten Free Society. It's the lowest we can ever go, and we have to do that. We have to make a special deal with our labs. So take advantage of it while you can. Can eye floaters go away on its own, given one follows a true gluten-free diet for years? I used to have eye floaters. One of the symptoms I used to have on it when I would get gluten exposure were eye floaters. I don't really get them anymore. So, but I've seen other people where they go away. Now, there are other reasons you can develop eye floaters. So I don't want to say for everyone that, the cure for all eye floaters is just a gluten-free diet. But in my experience and in my professional practice, I've seen that be the case. Do I have a favorite clean protein or nutrition bar? Not really. I'm not a big fan of the bars. They oxidize. By the time they roll off the shelf, they've been exposed to air and light, and they start oxidizing, and when that happens, they deteriorate really quickly. So I'm just not a really big fan of bars. I'd rather eat real food. And maybe that'll change. Maybe somebody will create it in a different way. We actually used to create a bar, and one of the problems we kept running into was oxidation. And I actually, it was one of our top selling products. But even though it was our top selling product, I terminated the bar because I just didn't think I was doing our customers justice. Because a lot of people ate it and loved it, but I could taste the oxidation in it, and I felt like it wasn't serving people at a high level. Do I see people with kidney stones? Yeah, frequently. I take Ultra D3 twice a week. Does that keep it up in my body and not taking too much or not getting enough? It's hard to know, Teresa. Ultra D3 twice a week, that's 100,000 units a week is what that would equate to. Very regularly I put people on 10,000 units a day, which equates to about 70,000 units a week to bring their D levels up. Can you take it too long and get it too high? Nobody's ever died from vitamin D toxicity. That being said, if you're taking high doses long term, it's not a bad idea to ask your doctor to periodically, about every 3 to 6 months, check your 25 OHD levels to make sure it's not going up too high. Because that range, you want to keep it somewhere ideally between, well, if you've got an autoimmune problem, between 70 and 100. If you're perfectly healthy, between 50 and 100 is ample. Once a month, I put a few drops of colloidal silver in my CPAP. Is this okay? I would say yes. You want to clean that CPAP because CPAP machines are mold breeding grounds. So you definitely want to make sure. And silver is an antifungal, so it can be used to kind of help clean it. But check with the manufacturer of the machine and make sure there's no contraindication for using it, but I can't imagine there would be. I've been gluten-free since a few weeks. I'm taking vitamins D3, B12, and spirulina to heal my gut. What do you recommend for healing my gut besides these vitamins? I think a good multivitamin, as I was saying earlier, a good multivitamin and a good omega-3 is a great place to start with just supporting your nutrition as you're changing your diet. Because beyond that, the specific recommendations that I like to give are very, very biochemically oriented to the unique person. So without testing, the best thing to do is just try to cover as many bases as you can generically. So ultra nutrients is what I would encourage you to use. I'm 60 and through menopause, and yet I'm suffering with severe cold and hot episodes all day and all night. Any thoughts about why? Also have hypothyroidism. Check your TSH valve, because a lot of times the TSH is going to be, you'll find that it's too low because you're being over medicated, and that will actually can mimic the symptoms of menopause, like the hot flashes, the cold flashes. So if you're this is a common problem with people, because doctors a lot of times won't monitor their thyroid numbers often enough. And so if you're being over medicated, that could be it. So check your TSH, ask your doctor to measure your TSH. If it's below 0.5, talk to them about making adjustments in your dose. How do you feel about plant-based milks, butters, or cheeses? Occasional use, but I'm not a big fan of regular use. Again, going back to, if you use them heavily, the biggest issue with nut-based milks is the omega-6 issue. So I try to keep my omega-6, personally, I try to keep mine around a less than 3, my 6:3 ratio. I try to keep it less than 3 to control the inflammatory response really tightly. And so again, Joni, what you may ask your doctor to do, if you enjoy these plant-based milks and you want to use them, check your omega periodically and just make sure that 6 is not creeping up too high. And if it's not, I think you're okay. Does gluten affect oxalate and histamine? Gluten can damage the bacteria that help you degrade oxalates. So in that regard, many people with prolonged gluten intestinal damage will have oxalate excess or problems breaking down histamine because the gluten damages the bacteria or damages the GI tract, and so it reduces our ability to produce the enzymes that can break down histamine, or reduces our microbes that are capable of helping us break down oxalate. So in that regard, yeah, gluten can help. It doesn't always. It's not, because gluten's not always the only trigger there, but it definitely can be a trigger. Love all the nice comments. Thank you guys for all your wonderful comments and appreciation. I would say on that note, if you appreciate what I do for you and the time I spend with you, the best thing you can do for me is mash the like button, subscribe if you're not, and share this with 10 people you love. Our mission here is to save 100 million lives, and I can't do that while I'm being censored without your help. You remember, go back 20 years ago when gluten was a whisper and nobody had ever really heard of gluten. And then myself and a few colleagues started being very outspoken about it. And today it's a household word, and every one of you has heard of gluten-free, because, in large part because of me, but also in large part because you guys helped spread this information. And that's how we reach the world. And I need you to keep helping me do that. Let's see here. Let's do one, maybe two more, because we're running a half hour behind here. Do you have answer that? Can there be a problem in taking a lot of vitamin C? Generally, no. It's pretty safe. I think I answered a question earlier about kidney stones and vitamin C. So pause and rewind and go back to that. But vitamin C is pretty safe. People don't die from vitamin C or damage themselves from taking higher doses of vitamin C. So really, really safe. But if you've got a history of kidney stones, start with lower doses and monitor your oxalate output in your urine, and just make sure that it's not going up, because there is a chance, a small one, that it can elevate your oxalate. Okay, one more. GABA as a supplement. What's my opinion about it? It can really be helpful for people with high levels of anxiety and stress. GABA is like the brakes, puts the brakes on stress and anxiety in the mind. But for long-term use, just indefinitely, I'm not a fan. We actually have something called Ultra Calm, which is a product that has some GABA and theanine and other calmatives in it. And it's designed more, to use as needed as opposed to use every day. Because ultimately, if you are asking yourself, is GABA the right supplement for me to take because I'm anxious? Then the bigger question that you need to be asking is, what is the biochemistry behind why I'm anxious? Remember, food allergies can cause anxiety. Nutrition deficit can cause anxiety. So you want to know those real causative answers before you just start taking a supplement forever to address a symptom. Remember, taking supplements to address symptoms is really no better than taking medicines to address symptoms. Philosophically speaking, the outcomes are not good. And the outcomes, what you really want to be after is the root cause, the reason why the problem exists. And if you can get to that answer, that's where the gold is, right? That's where the quality of life comes. That's where you save a ton of money because you're no longer buying, a gajillion different supplements to try to navigate it. It's where you're no longer needing medicines, and so you're saving a lot of money there. So anyway, okay. I think we're all set. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Make sure you're back Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, part 3 of how to game the system. Remember, we talked about the system is broken, and now we're talking about how to game it. And I'm teaching you guys how to solve autoimmune problems. I'm handing you over for free the blueprint to solve autoimmune problems. So don't miss part 3 of this very, very vital series if you struggle with autoimmune disease. Anyway, take care, and we'll see you next week.